Good morning, everybody. My name is Tara Nelson, and I'm the 6 o'clock anchor at CTV Calgary, and I'm very pleased to be with you here again today. Welcome to the Calgary TELUS Convention Centre and Calgary Economic Development's Economic Outlook 2020, presented by ATB Financial. I know this is one of my favorite events of the year. It's always so interesting, and judging by the fact that there's 1,500 of you in the room today, I know that this is one of your favorite events of the year, too. We have a packed house and a very full agenda, so please feel free to start eating your lunch. This is a working luncheon, and we'll just dive right into it. I'd like to acknowledge the land where we gather today is part of the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. That includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Economic Development 2020 is presented by ATB Financial. We also have the very generous support of the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, Mount Royal University, Haworth, Postmedia, CTV, FMAV, WestJet Airlines, the University of Calgary, the Business Development Bank of Calgary, and Alberta Blue Cross. So thank you for your help today. We have several special guests with us today, too, that we'd like to welcome. Lois Mitchell, the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta. Tanya Furr, MLA for Calgary-Pégan and Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Tourism. And also Richard Gottfried, the MLA for Calgary-Fish Creek. Please also welcome from City Council several members: Mayor Nenshi, Councillor Jeff Davison, Peter DeMong, Drew Farrell, Jyoti Gondek, Shane Keating, Ward Sutherland, and Evan Woolley. Thank you to Council as well. We also have two new university presidents with us today. Ed McCauley is the president of the University of Calgary, and Tim Rahilly, president of Mount Royal University. Welcome to you. And this is kind of exciting because post-secondary institutions are, of course, so important to the economic development. This year, we have invited 40 students from SAIT, Mount Royal, Bow Valley College, and the University of Calgary to attend. These, of course, are our leaders of tomorrow, so we're very pleased that you are here with us today, too. We'll hear from several speakers over the next 2 hours, including Minister Furr, Mayor Nenshi, Calgary Economic Development Board Chair Steve Allen, its President and CEO Mary Moran, and Wellington Holbrook, Chief Transformation Officer for ATB Financial. Our main speakers today are Pierre Cléroux, Chief Economist for Business Development Bank of Canada in Montreal, and Todd Hirsch, Chief Economist for ATB Financial. And we will, of course, as always, get their insights and forecasts for Alberta, Canada, and the global economies. We will conclude with a draw for 2 tickets anywhere WestJet flies in Canada or the United States. You have to be present to win this, but we promise we will get you out of here at 1:30 sharp. Now, before we begin, there's just a couple of quick housekeeping items. The washrooms are along the wall on my right in this room. They are well signed along that wall there. Should a fire alarm sound, please listen for instructions, but be prepared to exit at the nearest exit as best you can in a calm and orderly manner, as calmly as 1,500 people can race for the door. The exits are well marked as well. Proceed through the main hallway to the exits as you came in, the same way, leading down the stairs and outside. Now, as you might assume, with 8 speakers, there will not be any breaks in our program. So as I say, go ahead with your lunch and we'll get started. If you would like to join us on social media today, if you have any thoughts, if you'd like to contribute to the conversation, we would absolutely welcome that. You can use the hashtag Outlook2020. To begin, I would ask Tanya Furr, MLA for Calgary-Pégan, and our Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Tourism to provide opening remarks on behalf of the Government of Alberta.
Thank you, Tara. Hello and welcome. Thank you, Tara, for the introduction. I would like to thank Calgary Economic Development for inviting me to be a part of today's event. As Alberta's Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Tourism and MLA for Calgary Pagan, I am very aware of the immense value Calgary and business leaders like you bring to our economy. Calgary's vibrant communities, visionary mindset, and global perspective are what drew my family here. I, like so many others, choose to be a part of this energy. And the fact that Calgary is Alberta's largest city and one of the largest municipalities in Canada is a true testament to this. Over the past 3 decades, I've seen firsthand the ingenuity of our business community, as well as the promise and opportunity of the Alberta economy. I know our province is facing challenging times right now, but the vibrancy and innovative spirit of this city and our province should never be underestimated. That's why today's event is so valuable. This is a chance for us to share perspectives and ideas and identify opportunities. Our government and everyone here today wants Calgary and our province to be a destination that draws talent, leaders in innovation, investment, and business from across Canada and around the globe. And we will achieve this goal by making Alberta the best place in North America to invest, start a business, and raise a family. Our government is working each day to provide all Albertans with the greatest opportunities. We are laser focused on bringing investment back to Alberta. Since taking office a few short months ago, we have already taken action to repeal the carbon tax, reduce the tax burden on job creators by lowering the corporate tax rate from 12% to 8% over the next 4 years, and cut red tape to make Alberta one of the freest and fastest moving economies in the world. As part of our red tape reduction action plan, we launched the first 2 of 8 industry panels to help identify unnecessary red tape in key sectors of Alberta's economy. We also launched cutredtape.alberta.ca so Albertans can keep up to date on our actions so far and submit feedback on their encounters with costly and unnecessary red tape and suggestions on how to get rid of it. We want to hear from you, and I would like to encourage all of you to get involved and share your ideas on what we can do to make your jobs easier. These initial steps to kickstart our economy are already having positive effects within our business communities. I am excited and encouraged by all of the initiatives underway in the Calgary region. In fact, for the 2nd year in a row, the Economist Intelligence Unit has named Calgary the most livable city in North America. But we know we have more work to do. Through the work of my ministry, we will continue to focus on attracting investment from Canada and around the world, diversifying our markets and enhancing our access to them, fostering a strong research and innovation system that gives our province a competitive edge, promoting the growth of Alberta's tourism industry, and exploring new development and enhancing competitiveness. Our government will also be redirecting resources to back a strong economic growth strategy to restore investor confidence in Alberta. The world's largest investors need to know that Alberta is open for business across all sectors and all industries. And our government is here to bring about meaningful change and with a bold plan to create growth and jobs, attract investment, and create the best structural economic conditions in the world. Calgary and our province as a whole offers so many advantages. Our young and talented labor pool, entrepreneurial spirit, vibrant communities, and business-friendly environment make our province a prime destination for business and investment. And these advantages are a strong foundation that I know we can build on. We are going to do our part to help make Calgary and Alberta the first choice for investors and the world's best entrepreneurs and innovators. Our business leaders have so many innovative ideas, and together we will bring those ideas to fruition as we work together to bring back the Alberta advantage. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Furr. And now a man who really needs no introduction to this audience, Mayor Nenshi.
That's like the first time in 9 years that someone has said he needs no introduction and then has not actually given one. Thank you, Tara. I appreciate it. And let's hear it again for Minister Furr. She is going to do such a great job on Calgary's comeback with us. Thank you for that. Folks, I want to start actually with something sad. I'd like to acknowledge with so many friends and colleagues and fellow citizens in the room that yesterday we lost two great Calgarians, two amazing community builders. Jeffrey Spalding, who had been the CEO of both the Glenbow Museum and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Calgary, left us yesterday. And of course, we lost Calgary's current Citizen of the Year, Bill Potasic, the recently departed CEO of the Calgary Public Library. It's a sad moment, but you know what? I think both of them would appreciate a little sign of the appreciation that we have for the incredible job they've done building this community. Let's hear it for Jeff and for Bill. And I want to actually be on a bit of a positive note with all of you today because I think we have a lot of positive things to talk about together. So first of all, welcome to the Economic Outlook, or as I call it, the single longest lunch you'll ever have in your life. We have an action-packed session ahead for you today. You're going to hear from our about to depart chair of Calgary Economic Development. You're going to hear the announcement of our new chair. You're going to hear from Mary Moran with her State of the Union, which is going to be amazing. You're going to hear from super smart people, also Todd Hirsch. It's going to be fantastic. I saw Todd on the way in and I said, I'm not going to make a joke about you today. And he said, I'd be sad if you didn't. So what we are going to hear about is a story of Calgary's comeback. We're going to hear a lot about what we are doing in this place to build on the tremendous strengths that we have. You know, you've heard me at this event for several years now talking about how we need to focus on the positive in this place. And I'm going to keep doing that today, but today we're going to talk about our comeback. We're going to talk about what is changing in this place. We're going to talk about the amazing story that we have to tell here in Calgary. It's an amazing story of energy. It's an amazing story of the environment, of diversification. It's a story of continually striving to be better. It's the best comeback story. Let me just speak for a moment before I get into some of the things that your city and your city council have been working on lately, to talk a little bit about a big conversation that is going on in our community right now, and that is the conversation around how we balance the economy and the environment, and particularly the role of our energy sector in doing so. We live in an incredibly divisive time. We live in a time of tremendous polarization, and I got to tell you, I don't like it. I think that we succeed as a community when we listen to one another, when we talk to one another, and when we move forward together. And I think for far too many people, ending polarization, which we all agree on, means the person with whom I disagree should just shut up and go away. It's not how you end polarization. Some of the conversation that I've heard in this community about the visit of a teenager from Europe to Calgary has actually been a bit shocking. And almost no one has said, I'm interested in listening to her. I'm interested in listening to someone who can get 4 million people out in the streets talking about climate. We've either heard, please don't come here, or we've heard, please come here so I can lecture you about the great things that we do here. Neither of those are the right answer. The right answer is yes, telling the story and countering the misinformation about the incredible strides that our energy sector has made. The fact that here, in this place, we have major oil and gas exploration and production companies who have pledged to become net zero carbon emitters. That's a big deal, and we need to tell that story. But we also need to understand that we live in a place where we have to be both understanding and comprehensively understanding of the vision and the views of other people. We have to talk about climate. We have to talk about how the world is changing. We have to talk about the best ways of addressing that within a strong, positive energy sector. You've heard me say it before. I still believe and will always believe that access to clean, safe, comfortable energy is the single most powerful poverty-fighting tool we have. And we have to continue to ensure that people around the world have access to ethically sourced energy. But we also have to make sure that we're doing so in a way that understands people's very real concerns about the environment and about climate. That's how we attract investment here. It's not just about the macroeconomic stuff. It's not just about having the right tax advantages. All those are incredibly important. But it is also about people understanding that this is the place where we solve the big problems. Mary Moran is going to tell you about our economic development strategy and our vision, which is a very simple one. We want to be Canada's destination of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs who want to solve the world's biggest problems. Problems in energy, in the environment, in healthcare, in transportation, all of those things together here in this place. And I want to tell you a little bit about what your city government, the capital C city of Calgary, is doing to support Calgary's comeback. As a municipality, as a city council, and many of my council colleagues are here, we know that we're a key player in our economic environment, and we've been doing a lot over the last few years to continue to build on our vision of maintaining Calgary as the very best place in Canada to start and grow a business. Our new city manager, David Duckworth, is amazing, and we've really asked him to hone in laser-focused on how we focus around Calgary's comeback. But I want to talk about where we're at and what we have going for us. You heard from Minister Furr that this is a great place to live. I mean, let's not forget that we were named this year again as the very best city, not just in North America, but in the entire Western Hemisphere in which to live. That's worth celebrating. In our last citizen satisfaction survey, 86% of Calgarians said that the overall quality of life here is good or great. That's a big deal. And it's not what you would hear if you listen to the doom and gloom conversations in the media and in certain boardrooms in this place. People are thrilled to live here. That is a staggering number. And we have to make sure that we're building on that quality of life every single day. The cost of living is super competitive. The cost of doing business is super competitive. A recent C.D. Howe Institute looking at 10 major urban economies across North America found that Calgary had the lowest cost of doing business of all 10. Our residential property taxes and our non-residential property taxes are amongst the lowest of any major city. The residential are the lowest, and the non-residential are certainly in the bottom decile of property taxes in this country. So we need to be proud of that, and we need to understand that we built the environment here in terms of talent, taxes, resources, and macroeconomic conditions, as well as cost of living, to attract incredible amounts of investment. Of course, there are major challenges. The tax shift that has resulted from the downtown vacancy and the resultant declining property values in the core is hurting a lot of small businesses outside of the core. And we as the city are challenged to find the right balance between the services we provide and keeping the cost of government low. Unemployment is still way too high. It's improving. The recent job numbers that were released last week are good. It needs to keep moving and it needs to do better. And that's why at the City of Calgary we're focused in 3 areas to support this comeback. Supporting local business, Calgary's downtown, managing the cost of government. So very quickly, supporting local business, Mary's going to talk a lot about this in terms of our business environment pillar, but I want you to know that we're the first city in Calgary to provide an online virtual one-window approach to permitting supported by live chat. You can start your business entirely online in a very easy process. We're the first in Canada to approve pop-up and interim businesses in any commercial area, getting rid of red tape, getting rid of lengthy approval processes and licensing restrictions. You're going to see a lot more. There's a newly formed business and local economy team that'll be your one-stop shop, your concierge for business-related inquiries. And next week, in addition to there being an election, is Small Business Week. And we're going to be rolling out next week a number of things with our partners at the Calgary Chamber, a number of events which are really excited. And what I'm most excited about is the launch of our new Buy Local campaign. Businesses have told us, look, you can muck around with our taxes and our cost of doing business. What we really need are customers. And that actually solves the problem. So we're reminding all Calgarians, before you click on that online shopping bot, think about buying locally. Think about spending your money here in this community. It is the single most impactful way you can impact the Calgary economy and support and grow business here in this city. That includes shopping. Christmas is coming up. It includes local retailers, but it also includes for all of you who have control over your supply chain and your procurement processes in your businesses. It means looking to local suppliers. It means thinking about how your procurement policies can help support wealth-creating entrepreneurs right here in our own community. Calgary's downtown. We got to fill those vacancies. We're not going to do it 300, 400,000 square feet at a time, but we're winning. We're winning bit by bit. We're winning with companies like Parkland coming into downtown Calgary. We're winning with WeWork. Don't read about what they're going on with their IPO, but WeWork is building 2,500 desks in 2 downtown office buildings. We're winning with the Edison, and I know Scott Hutchison is here, and the remarkable work that is doing to attract different kind of businesses downtown. We're winning with projects like the Cube and the Barron Building, both projects of strategic, converting office space into residential space to get more people living downtown. Because it's not just about vacancy, it's about vibrancy, and we need these investments in our downtown core. We're winning on making big investments, big transformational investments here in the city, including the expansion of the BMO Convention Centre, including investment in the arena, including investment in the Arts Commons. These major investments are a critical part of our downtown strategy. And you may have noticed little things that make a big difference. Whether it's e-scooters, super fun, be careful. Or one of my favorite things in here, how many know about BUMP? BUMP is the Beltline Urban Mural Project. And if you walk through the Beltline, you will see great, amazing, large-scale murals on formerly blank walls in buildings throughout the Beltline. It was a very cheap, very exciting project. You now have tourists going on mural tours. And that's only been in the last 18 months or so. So what can you expect to see? Big projects take shape. The Rivers District move forward. A redesign of Stephen Avenue. The integration of the Green Line through the downtown. Finally, I just want to say a few words about fiscal responsibility at the city. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I want to be very clear about something. Your city government is the best run government at any order of government in this country. And that's something else to be very proud of. My colleagues at the city do incredible work. We've invested $7.1 billion in strategic capital investments to create jobs and build and maintain our infrastructure. We found over $600 million in savings in our operating budget to keep your taxes low. Taxes, in fact, have gone up by less than inflation and population growth since the beginning of this downturn. We provided $130 million in tax mitigation to small businesses, and we've implemented base budget reductions of $60 million for this year to apply to help small businesses. Right now, we're engaging Calgarians to help us make good decisions as we pass our next budget in November. We're reviewing city services to ensure alignment, and we continue to reduce costs. Over the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to have a big conversation about our budget, and we really invite all of you to join in on here. Ultimately, the city is committed to economic recovery. We're here for a very simple job: make life better every day. And my 20,000 colleagues at the city who go to work every single day to do that, whether they are cleaning up our streets, whether they are looking after our parks and green spaces, whether they are driving garbage trucks and buses, whether they're first responders or they're on the other side of the phone when you make the most terrifying phone call of your life. Every single one of those women and men go to work every single day to make life better here, and we are incredibly proud of every single one of them. So, welcome to Calgary's comeback. And to paraphrase one of that great economist, LL Cool J, hey, Mayor, don't call it a comeback. We've always been here. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor Nenshi. Please help me welcome now Steve Allen, Chair of the Board of Governors for Calgary Economic Development. Steve has an announcement and will introduce our next speaker.
Well, thank you very much, Tara, and it's high noon, so good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I have a very brief but important role here today. Serving this community is a great privilege, and I'm honored to be chair of the Board of Directors for Calgary Economic Development for at least the next minute. The incredible Calgarians who freely volunteer their time and energy on our boards to make this city better every day are a true inspiration, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to work with them. There are now 3 separate boards of directors that oversee and guide the work at Calgary Economic Development. The Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, chaired by Barry Munro, and the Calgary Film Centre, chaired by Patty McLeod. I'm going to list all our new board members, and will ask that each of them stand when I call their names and remain standing until I conclude my remarks. And please hold your applause until they're all introduced. So I'm pleased to announce we have 2 new directors for the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. Mark Blackwell, a partner at Builders VC. Mark, hard to see everybody here, but I'm trusting he's here and standing. Nancy Laird, I did see Nancy earlier, corporate director in the energy and tech sectors in Calgary. And we have no changes to the Film Centre board, but I would ask that all board members of the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund and the Film Centre please stand and be recognized, and their names are on the screen here. We have 8 additions to the Board of Directors for Calgary Economic Development, and they join with the existing directors to help reinforce Calgary Economic Development's connections to the business community. The new members are David Duckworth, the new City Manager for the City of Calgary. David, please stand. Charles Duncan, Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for WestJet Airlines. Catherine Emberley, President, Business, Brand and Communications at Shaw Communications. Christine Gillespie, Vice President, Transportation, Distribution and Logistics at Nutrien. Robert Hayes, Head of Corporate Finance and Commercial Banking, Ontario and Western Canada for the National Bank of Canada. John Osler, QC, Partner of McCarthy Tetro. And Andrea White, Partner of Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt. Those of you who were counting along will note that is only 7 names. Our 8th new board member will be my successor as chair of the board, and I can't think of a better person for the role than the one selected by the search committee, Joe Lougheed. Joe, please stand. The Lougheed family has deep roots serving Calgary, and Joe has certainly carried on in that tradition. Joe is a partner at the international law firm of Dentons and an active community volunteer dedicated to serving our city. He's past chair and director of SAIT, past chair and director of the Calgary Chamber, and a former director of the United Way of Calgary and area. I have absolute confidence in all our board members to provide the leadership and guidance for Mary and her incredible team at Calgary Economic Development. Now I would ask all of Calgary Economic Development board members to please stand. I would ask you to join me in giving them a round of applause for their great service to our city. And it is now my great pleasure to ask Mary Moran to come forward and talk to you about our vision for the future and Calgary in the new economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. And how about a round of applause for Steve Allen, who has been a dedicated board chair for 6 years. Now, Steve is staying on as past chair, so we'll have another 12 months to celebrate his contribution to the organization and also maybe even roast him. But he's done an amazing job of mostly keeping me caged, which is a task all in itself. But and I also don't know if you noticed, but did you notice how many women we have on our board? More than 50%, which is remarkable. So I'm definitely in good company. But good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for coming to our Economic Outlook 2020. It is such a privilege for me to be able to share the stage with our good partners, ATB as well as BDC. It has definitely been a challenging year, and they are going to talk a lot about the economic indicators because I spent the whole weekend with my family talking about those over Thanksgiving and fighting with them about it, but they're going to cover that. And my job here today is to talk to you about our vision of Calgary and the new economy and talk to you about the progress that we've made since we launched it here at this event last year, and also to talk to you about the priorities that we have and the initiatives that we're rolling out over the near future. It has definitely been a challenging road, and I know that most of you have difficulty seeing what the road ahead is for Calgary. Every time we seem to turn the corner, we're faced with a steep uphill climb or another sharp turn and don't really know where we're going to. But this challenge is our greatest opportunity. And it's because Calgary is facing a once-in-a-generation opportunity, an opportunity to change the path that we're on and make a better community for our children and our grandchildren, to build on our past strengths and embrace and adapt for the future. And that's why in 2017, the end of 2017, we worked with Boston Consulting Group and KPMG to develop a new strategy for Calgary. A strategy that was built by the community for the community as we engaged 1,800 everyday Calgarians and had the support of over 30 CEOs to try to create a future for ourselves. And we asked ourselves three big questions. The first question that we asked ourselves is how can we develop a vision for Calgary that is actually going to position ourselves as solution providers? And we also asked ourselves, how are we going to develop a strategy that will reflect our values of being inclusive, entrepreneur, and reflect our community spirit? And we also asked ourselves about how we can ensure that we have shared prosperity for our entire community, and that we create a strategy that resonates with Canadians and business leaders and talent of all ages and politicians, regardless of who is in power. And so we built a strategy that is focused on four key pillars: innovation, place, business-friendly, and talent. And the mayor revealed the secret, but that strategy is for Calgary to become the place where the world's best entrepreneurs come. And they embrace the advanced technologies that are facing every single corner of the world, and they solve problems. And those problems are in cleaner energy, with our abundance of carbon molecules underground, and our abundance of wind and solar in this community. For us to deliver food security with our strong agriculture sector here that is growing every single day. For us to move people and goods around more efficiently with our strong logistics and transportation and aerospace industries. And for us to increasingly solve and create better health solutions with the world-class research that is being done out of the University of Calgary. Now, there's other opportunities as well in creative industries and advanced technologies and tourism, but those four pillars are our key pillars and our key strengths. And the strategy, Calgary and the New Economy, clearly states that we want to be disruptors, not be disrupted. And when you look at the advanced technologies coming towards all of our sectors like a tsunami, it's not surprising that companies like IBM and Microsoft and Google and Amazon Web Services and Cisco are looking at the industries that we excel at, for a big opportunity where they are investing trillions and trillions of dollars for us to be more predictive, more productive, and more efficient. And it's happening right here, right now. We conducted research this summer that looked at what is the investment going to be in those advanced technologies in Alberta. And conservatively, it forecasted by talking to all of our industry partners and the corporations in Alberta that there's going to be $18.5 billion invested in advanced technologies across our industrial sectors in Alberta. And most of those decisions for that applied technology will happen right here in Calgary. And I can tell you from the daily conversations that I have with companies like Nutrien or Suncor or Trimac or WestJet or Parkland, they sound, and you ask them about their digital roadmap, and they talk to you about artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things and AR and VR and autonomous vehicles, and they sound way more like a tech company than they do an energy, agriculture, or transportation company. But it is competitive out there. And I can tell you, there are jurisdictions across Canada that are buying the business. And so I applaud the City of Calgary for coming up with the $100 million fund, Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, because we are in tough competition. I pitch Calgary every single day, and we often are pitching against other jurisdictions across the country and across North America. And so what we're looking for is investments that align with the economic strategy. How did we accelerate the agenda for becoming the center of excellence for digital transformation in the industrial sectors in Canada? Because we are the only city that can own it because of our high concentration of headquarters. We've got great talent here, very smart people here that can solve some of those problems. And so to date, with this investment fund, we've invested approximately $23 million. And for every dollar that's been invested, we've seen $7 more invested in Calgary. And these investments have generated over 1,000 jobs and promised to create an unimaginable number of companies. But let's get back to the progress and the priorities of Calgary and the new economy. Now, the mayor stole just about all my content for this, so I'm going to make it way more entertaining. But under innovation, I look at the things that have happened here in the last year and the things that people are unaware of. So if you take one message away today, just know that in Calgary, things are happening fast and there's a lot happening. 4 out of 5 of the new companies created in Calgary are actually tech companies. For the first time ever in this year, earlier this year, we attracted more venture capital than we ever have before, and we were very close to BC and Quebec. And our Life Science Innovation Hub that we invested in from Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund is hugely successful, and almost 80% of the lab is full. This is taking the world-class research out of the University of Calgary, commercializing it, and creating dozens and dozens of companies. I will say about the Life Science Innovation Hub, this is when I will be in the nursing home and be grateful we made this investment, because there'll be a really strong life science cluster here. And of course, the work that Clean Resource Innovation Network, who didn't get a super cluster, but patiently waited for funding that they got this year, and as the mayor said, are determined to get to a net zero fossil fuel. And they're working with the wind and the solar companies and other industries to ensure that Calgary starts to address some of the problems that are raised by the Climate Action Group. And then, of course, there's the big headlines. They got more play in New York than they did in Calgary and Toronto, but Solium, a fintech company, got sold for $1 billion here in Calgary by Morgan Stanley, and they're staying here because they love Calgary, they love the people that work at Solium, now called ShareWorks, and they're going to grow and even do more here. And then Parvis, a therapeutics company out of the University of Calgary, did a partnership with a biopharmaceutical company in California, and they're going to stay here and grow. And I haven't even touched on company attraction. BASF, a $65 billion company, decided to set up their headquarters here for Canada, strengthening our agriculture and our crop sciences sector. AMD, the largest multinational semiconductor producer, set up an office here. And then we have smaller tech companies like New World Interactive that focuses on gaming, who moved here from Denver, and companies like Finger Foods that are coming here to develop customized software to build capacity and build talent. But we've got a lot more work to do on the innovation pillar. And our top 3 priorities for the next 12 to 18 months are going to be focused on working with the government of Alberta and the government of Canada to ensure that we get more capital investing in technologies here in Alberta. We're also going to be focused on the opening of Platform, which we're super excited about, where this is going to be a place where the enterprise-wide companies can go and find the startups. I know that we'll be looking back at this day and we'll be thinking about, we can't wait until people start talking about us as an innovation and a tech center. Under Place, the mayor talked about that they made a decision to invest in BMO to create a Tier 1 convention center, and he talked about the great work that's been done to get the arena or the event center across the deal. And we're super excited about that. But under Place, I would say the thing that I'm most excited about is the fact that WestJet was bought by Onyx. Because increasingly so, talent likes to go to communities they can see themselves in. So that investment in infrastructure is super important, but what is equally important is having access to air service. And Onyx's decision to invest in Calgary is because they want to make Calgary the Canadian hub like the Chicago or the Dallas-Fort Worth. So all of you will get better air service as a result of their commitment. And we've seen that commitment from WestJet with their deployment of the 3 Dreamliners already. It is such an important economic driver, it's unbelievable. And when it comes to Place, we want to ensure that the city and the other orders of government are still making investment, and that will be our priority, is how do we get all the other projects across the line, including the Green Line. Now, moving on to business friendly. The mayor talked a lot about all the great work that we're the first city and also did the minister talk about all the great work that we're doing for Alberta is Open for Business and the great online, very sophisticated and technologically advanced opportunities for coming in to get permitting process. And we also have living labs set up by the City of Calgary where people can test technologies and they can test products on city properties. And I would say the greatest one is the autonomous systems, but dozens and dozens of companies are coming into the City of Calgary's Living Lab to test products and technologies that will help us be a greater innovation center. But my biggest concern and my biggest priority for the future is how do we become the most digitally connected city? Not only how are we going to be ready for 5G, but how are we going to be ready for 10G? Because if we want to compete against the Torontos and the Montreals and the Vancouvers, then we better be ready to provide a good service to the tech companies and tech talent that we want to attract here. Now, I want to focus on talent. Talent is the toughest nut to crack and is the lowest ceiling on economic development. And so the work that we're doing around this and have done around this has been quite tremendous since that dreaded day Amazon called to say they weren't coming here, because we learned a lot from them. We learned a lot about that we needed to marry the great tech talent that we have here, more traditional engineering, with software engineer and data scientists. And a lot of people don't know, but we have 2,000 to 3,000 of these jobs available in Calgary today, and we can't fill them. So since that dreaded day that Amazon called, we've been able to increase the number of tech spots in Calgary by 300%. And some of that's the great work being done by the post-secondaries, but it's also great work being done by private organizations like Evolve U and NPower. And a program we're about to roll out called Edge Up, which is specifically targeted at energy workers that are trying to work in technology. So we have a 3-pronged approach, and that 3-pronged approach is to retain as many people coming out of our great post-secondaries as possible, and to retrain as many people as possible who want to make a switch and/or are sitting idle. here and don't want to leave Calgary. But we also have to go recruit. And the challenge with recruiting, based on the research that we just conducted this June, is people no longer think of us as innovative and entrepreneur, which is shocking to me. Because when I started this job, and it's not my fault, by the way, but when I started this job, 80% of Canadians thought Calgary was innovative and entrepreneur. And now we're down to, their perception is only 30% of them think it. And only 50% of the rest of the world thinks that. So we have a lot to do to change that perception. So we're about to embark on a $4 million campaign that we want to roll out over the next couple of years. And that $4 million campaign will start to change the conversation. And that conversation is going to be, and that narrative will be, that there's a lot more going on here than people expect. In fact, based on our vision and what's going on here and how fast it's happening, this will be the only place that you will be able to live tech and love life. Thanks for that, Jason. You could have just clapped. This is a really important message for the rest of the world to hear, because they don't think that there's an ecosystem here, and yet we have so many jobs available, and technology isn't a sector. It's actually a way of doing business, and the biggest advancements are actually going to be made in the sectors we are so good at. So we're going to create some intrigue by using technology terms and marry that with an image about our lifestyle. So we're going to use things like cloud computing and show our mountains. We're going to say things like fintech and the fact you can actually go fishing at lunch and be back at your fintech company by 1 o'clock. And we're going to use words like angel investor that allow us to embrace our winter experience here that we love so much, not so much in September, but that we love so much. And we're going to talk about these great innovative companies that are homegrown here, because the reality is so many people don't know it. And we're excited about this opportunity to go talk about Calgary in a different way. But let me go back to the full strategy. I look at the strategy and the work that we do at Calgary Economic Development as a flock of geese. And the reality is we are the stewards of Calgary and the new economy, but we don't always lead. We rely on our civic partners like CMLC or Marco at the Downtown Business Association, or our post-secondaries or corporate Calgary. And sometimes we might be out front flying to lead a direction, set a vision, but we need everybody's help in this work. And if we fly together with a shared vision of where we're going and what our future looks like, then people will rotate out of that lead position. And by flying in formation, we will be more efficient, and we will lift each other up and contribute to being 70, just for the record, 70% more efficient like geese. And the people, the geese in the back, who have the easy job, their role is simple. They honk as loud as they possibly can to give the people up front that are working so hard encouragement. And that is how we work together in this community. And we have always worked together in this community. And that's why we are so grateful for you coming here today. And our big ask of you today, we have two. The first one is that we want your ideas. There are 1,500 very smart people in this room today. And we invite you today, 2 days from now, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now, to share your ideas. Because good ideas don't care where they come from. But we need everybody's contribution to this, because the strategy is not a document that sits on a shelf. It is an iterative process, and I know that many of you have really good ideas. So there's instructions on the table how to do that. But also our work is made possible by the great contribution that our Team Calgary partners make. They provide financial support through community investment, but they also provide thought leadership through the numerous boards and committees that we have. And we are so grateful for the contribution that they have made, and many of them have been with us for many years. And they have allowed us to go out and tell the story of Calgary. They have allowed us to go shape the story of Calgary. And their contribution has allowed us to create a new video that we'd like to share with you today. We like to call it the anthem, but we know that it will change the narrative of Calgary, so enjoy.
I know a place that's as tough as it is compassionate, a place with an unwavering work ethic and immeasurable heart. Qualities woven into the fabric of this city and its people. You see it in the day-to-day moments and the moments it's needed most. This place is Calgary, Alberta, a future-proof city, diverse in culture and diverse in economy. You might know it for its oil, farming, the Red Mile, or the greatest outdoor show on earth. But you'd only be scratching the surface. Calgary is a whole lot more. Anything is possible here. See, if you've got a dream and you're willing to do the work, Calgary has your back. The proof is in the people, the entrepreneurs that built this city, the innovators, risk takers, and artists. The proof is in the work they've done and keep on doing. It's in the culture they've created that keeps on inspiring. It's in the tech, energy, and life sciences sectors where cutting-edge, industry-disrupting work is being done every day. The proof is in our small businesses, a lot of them not so small anymore. This is the most livable city in all of North America, and one of the most livable cities on the planet. 5th, actually, but who's counting? So what's that mean? It means clocking out at 5 and being in the mountains for 6. It's a short commute that's easy or fun or breathtaking. Calgary is a city with a proud heritage and a limitless future. It's the city of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs. And if you want to be a part of all this, part of something big, something special, that time is right now. And we'd be happy to have you. Be part of the energy.
I hope that reminds you of the true Calgary. Certainly it did my staff, because they cried when I showed it to them last week, but I cried too. But I think it's really important to be reminded about what our superpower is. And our superpower is our community spirit. It's been our superpower in the good times, and it's been our superpower in the bad times. And now, more than ever, we need your help. Calgary Economic Development needs your help. Calgary needs your help. And so I invite any of you or all of you to join Team Calgary so we can get out the word to more people in more places. The word that Calgary is the most livable city in the Western Hemisphere. And there's a lot more going on here than people think. The word that Calgary truly is the city in Canada for the world's best entrepreneurs to come and stay, and for them to solve the world's greatest challenges. So thank you very much for all of you for coming. And my special, special friend, Grand Chief Littlechild, who has been so inspirational to me in the last 18 months, that has joined us at our table. But we really appreciate you coming, and we really appreciate you supporting our work. On behalf of all of us at Calgary Economic Development, it is such an honor for us to be able to serve our community in this important role at this important time in Calgary's history. Thank you so much.
Mary, thank you very much. That was super. Now let's welcome someone who is, of course, a fixture at Economic Outlook in recent years with his great slides and his insights into our economy, Senior Vice President and Chief Economist for ATB Financial, Todd Hirsch.
Dayton, Ohio, 1885. And in that year, a young high school student by the name of Willie was just completing grade 12. He was looking forward to going on to Yale University. Willie was an exceptional student. He was bright in his academics. He was good at athletics. He excelled at everything he tried. He was popular. He was outgoing. And the future was very bright for our young friend Willie. But before he completed high school, two tragic events changed the trajectory of his life. One was a serious sporting accident. In fact, it was a hockey accident. It left Willie with a physical disability. He was unable to ever play hockey or participate in most sports ever again. The other tragic event was the untimely illness and sudden death of his mother, which you can imagine for a young high school student was devastating. These two tragic events changed the course of Willie's life. He actually, in fact, never finished high school. He did not go on to Yale University. And in fact, after he left high school, or after he dropped out of grade 12, his life kind of turned into a bit of a recluse. He withdrew from life. He lived with his father in the basement and surrounded himself with books. He kind of became a bit of a hermit, in fact, and seemed to be a sad story for a young man with so much fantastic potential. We're going to come back to Willie and how that story ends a little later. But I love this quote here from Harari. In a world deluged by irrelevant information, clarity is power. Boy, when I read, this is the opening statement of Harari's new book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. When I read that opening sentence, I thought this is the book for me. Because I'm assuming a lot of you feel like me, you are deluged with information, a lot of it irrelevant. Used to be the saying that information was power. But today, I would say clarity is power. We've got a lot of information. It's at our fingertips. We are surrounded by it. We are deluged by information. But clarity is almost more powerful now than just the information itself. And that's what I want to do this afternoon is, in the time I have, use some of that power of clarity. Give you some tools to think about two things. One, the future of work and what that means for Alberta businesses, what that means for Alberta workers, because the world of work is changing very rapidly. And the other is Alberta's current economic outlook, which my team and I spend a lot of time going over the data and trying to get a feel for where we're at and where things are going. So my job this morning is not to give you more information, but rather, I hope, to give you some clarity in thinking about the world of work and Alberta's current economy. Let's talk first of all about the world of work. Well, a lot of us, when we think about the world of work, we tend to think about robotics and automation. And with that, there is a little bit of anxiety. Especially around that word, I would suggest robotics and robots. Because for a lot of us, when we think about robots, this is maybe the images that come to mind. Some of us will remember Rosie from the Jetsons. Some will remember R2-D2 and C-3PO. Some, if you're of my vintage, do you remember the Bionic Man and the Bionic Woman? Do you remember the Bionic Woman? There were these fembots, these robotic women that would show up. They were the villains in the show. They were absolutely terrifying. And Jamie Summers would rip their face off and action would ensue. But these are the images a lot of us think of when we think about robotics. And in 2019, at least not in my world, we don't see a lot of these things running around our economy. And therefore, it's a little bit difficult sometimes for us to think about, well, how are robotics really transforming the work world? I don't see robots, although I would suggest in some industries you are seeing increasing numbers of robots that do maybe look like these. But for most of us, robotics are not transforming our work world. Rather, it's more automation than robotics. And I want to use an example, a very typical example that almost everyone in the room is going to be familiar with. Either yourself, it might be a parent, it might be a grandparent. And that is a situation where a senior citizen requires some medications. This is very, very common. Almost every senior I know has some prescriptions that they take that help them maintain their lifestyle. Here's what it looks like now when we think about seniors getting their medication. The senior would go down to the doctor's office and would be greeted by a receptionist. Then the senior or the patient would probably meet with a technician. The technician would draw some blood, maybe do a blood pressure test, run a few other tests or diagnostics. The patient would then have a few moments to talk with the doctor to see how things are going. The doctor might make a few changes to the prescription, tweak things depending on the glucose levels or the blood pressure levels, make some adjustments to the medications. The patient would then take that new prescription, go down to the pharmacist. The pharmacist would explain how to take the medications. The patient would pay at the drugstore for the medications, perhaps take a bus home, perhaps be visited the next day by a healthcare professional providing some in-home care. And this is what the cocktail of pills usually looks like. A handful of all sorts of pills. And sometimes we're asking seniors to cut pills in half and trying to tweak and adjust all of these medications that we give them. This is what the process looks like currently. Here's what it's going to look like in the very near future, and in some places, this is what it already looks like. Rather than visiting a technician, the patient has a wearable device monitoring things like blood pressure, glucose levels, heart rate, all of those vital statistics. That information is then beamed up into the cloud on a 5G network. It's received by some sort of tablet or device where a diagnostic assessment is made of those statistics, and a new prescription is sent back up into the cloud via the internet to a 3D printer, which 3D prints a single designer customized tablet for that patient with all of the necessary medications tweaked precisely. That one tablet is then delivered via drone. I'm not even kidding on that, and I saw a drone in Mary's slide, so I was happy about that. The drone delivers the one tablet to the patient who has now one pill to take. Now, just contrast and compare the two systems. Let's go back to that first system, the system as it currently looks. If you count the number of people in this process, not counting the patient himself, there are 7 individuals involved in this process. In the new system, there is nobody involved. And in fact, there's not even a robot involved. It's not necessarily robots that are replacing jobs, it's automated systems that are replacing jobs. And this leads to a lot of anxiety. People worried about, is my job going to disappear next? And in some cases, we are seeing a lot of jobs being eliminated. We're also seeing new jobs in new industries coming up, of course. But I also want you to notice, rather than just the number of jobs that might be displaced in this new process, something else important is happening here. And that is, in this new process, although it is much more efficient in terms of delivering a medication to a patient, far more efficient. But the other situation that is arising is social poverty. We're creating potentially a whole new set of problems, because that one patient, he used to interact with 7 individuals, and now he's interacting with no one. Look how lonely he looks. He's sitting there with his one pill. But joking aside, social poverty is the new challenge for our economy. Economists, we used to spend a lot of time talking about solving financial poverty. And I would concede financial poverty is still an enormous challenge, especially for many families right now in Alberta. But social poverty is perhaps a more challenging problem. It's a little harder to identify, and it's not quite as easy to solve just by redistributing some income. Social poverty, I would suggest, leads to mental health problems, all sorts of social problems that can arise from this. This is something else we are going to have to tackle, rather than just look at job displacement alone. But let's get back to the world of work. I want to show a little bit of a timeline, the evolution of human labor. And what I mean by this, there's a bit of a stepladder when we think of work. It starts with words at the bottom like activities. Then it moves up to things like tasks, work, job, and finally employment. And as you move up that ladder, the world of work and employment becomes more structured. At that bottom level, activities, tasks, You know, back when our forefathers, maybe early pioneers in this part of the province or in this part of the country, or our ancestors before that, people were always busy doing things. It's not that they were sitting around a whole lot. Everyone had activities they were busy doing. But as we move up that ladder, things become more structured. Activities turn into tasks, which turns into work, and then into job, and then finally into employment, which is very structured. Now, as economists want to do all the time, let's throw this against a graph of time. We can't help ourselves. This is every time we get some information, let's graph this over time. So let's start roughly in the 1800s. Back then, more of our economic activity was administered by activities in that agrarian farming economy. People were very busy, but it was more activities and task-based. And as we move into the 1900s and the Industrial Revolution starts to take hold, and by the 1950s, sort of the peak of the industrial age, you see more of that economic activity is taken up by employment. Employment with structured contracts. There's expectations on the employee when he or she needs to show up for work, expectations about the job that needs to be done, the time that they're going to be on the job. This is the era of the punch clock. Does anyone remember the time clock when you punch in and punch out? It was all a very structured world of employment. But after the 1950s and the second half of the 20th century, we get into the digital age. And this starts to change everything all over again. Now we start to see over time the world of labor becoming less structured. Yeah, there's still employment, and employment contracts mean something. But because of technology and all of those gadgets and abilities we have that technology provides us, we're much more free to do our work when we want to do it, how it suits us best, integrating our work and our life combined. My guess is not very many of you punched a time clock this morning. There might be some that still do. My guess is that most of you, if you think about how you are working today compared to how you worked 30 years ago or even 10 years ago, my guess is most of you would say, yeah, actually my work is far less structured today. I still work really hard and I accomplish a lot, but it isn't quite so dominated by 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. I have more liberty to kind of move my work around when it makes more sense for me and my family. That is what we're starting to see, work and labor becoming less structured and actually moving down that ladder a little bit into job, work, tasks, and activities. Here's another way to visualize how work has changed over time. Here we're going to look at perhaps an individual's lifespan of education, work, and retirement. The first half of the 20th century, 1900 to roughly 1950s, this is what it looked like. That blue bar is education. That's the first part of your life. Most people in that time era, maybe grade 8, maybe grade 10. Some would make it to grade 12, but primary and secondary education dominated for most people in that time period. That was followed by a long yellow bar, which was called employment or working for pay. And by and large, that was sort of one career that you would choose, that you would go into. Often it would have been what perhaps your father or your family was involved in. That was the occupation that you picked up. And that was followed by a very short period of time called retirement, or a period of time when you were not working for pay at all. And right there was age 65. Now, back in the 20s, back in Europe, when social welfare networks and retirement networks, government pension programs were being set up for the first time, they picked age 65 as retirement age only because age 66 was life expectancy. That is really the only reason. I'm not even making that up. 65, so on average, you get 1 year to retire, which means half the people didn't even make it a full year of retirement, and some lived a little bit longer. But generally, retirement was a very short period of time after a long period of work. After the 1950s, after the end of the Second World War, into the second half of the 20th century, 1950s to roughly the 1980s, things started to change. Now education became a more important piece of most individuals' life. Grade 12 was a minimum, and for more and more North Americans and Canadians, going to post-secondary became important. That might be university, it might have been a trade school, it might have been a polytechnic, but generally some form of post-secondary education became much more common and much more normal, and in some ways more expected. So a longer period of education still followed by a long yellow period of employment, but now you start to see it perhaps interrupted now and then with a period of, you wouldn't really call it retirement, but you would call it unemployment, or a period of time where you are not working for pay. And this is where our system of employment insurance was set up to address these short periods of time where you would perhaps lose a job, you would receive some benefits that would bridge you from or during your period of unemployment, but the expectation was you go down, if the factory laid you off, you collect your EI benefits and you get a job at the factory down the street or at the office on the next block, and you resumed your career. But it was also during this period of time after the 1950s where life expectancy started to increase. And now people are living much longer. And it was during this period of time why mathematically a lot of the traditional pensions that companies and governments offered, they no longer really worked, because you can see we're living much longer. So already we're starting to see some tensions form. After the 1980s to roughly the 2000s, the turn of the millennium, we start to see more complications again. Still a long period of time of education, but now in that yellow bar, you see more interruptions. You start to see phrases like lifelong learning, where there is an expectation during your career that you are going to go back to school, or you are maybe taking some training and upgrading of your skills. The weekend MBA programs, all of these things started to become much more common after the 1980s, still with interruptions, periods of unemployment. But the other thing we're starting to notice in this period of time is people who continue to work after age 65. Sometimes they're doing it because they want to do it, because they're still very healthy and active and vital at age 65, and they're not ready to quit working and sit and do nothing. Other cases, they're still working maybe because they have to keep working, because economic conditions require them. Their savings were perhaps not adequate, requiring them to continue in the workforce in some capacity after age 65. But what does it look like today and going into the future? Well, now we've got a much more complicated world of work, education, and retirement. These blocks of time, they sort of blur into each other, and it's not so discrete. Education continues throughout your life, and in fact, work starts earlier in life. The commonness of high school students and university college students working, at least part-time, while they are studying. So you start to see those yellow bars creep earlier and earlier in life. Throughout that long period of what we'd normally call work and career, we see lots of interruptions with education, but also people moving in and out of the workforce. Not necessarily, again, for retirement, but it might be for parental leave, for example. And my prediction is one of the biggest reasons we are going to see people moving in and out of the workforce is aging or caring for aging parents, which I think is going to become a much more common expectation of workers in the future. And again, that red period of time, you're seeing work and education even into later stages of life. So what does all this mean for both workers and for employers? Well, I think there's interesting implications. For workers, or for maybe young students who are looking at entering the workforce soon, it won't be so much about picking a career. I think that will become a bit of an old-fashioned word. You know, my age and people of, who grew up in the 20th century, we were asked when we were little children, what do you want to be when you grow up? Implying that there is going to be a career choice you pick, and you kind of follow that. I don't think we're asking kids that anymore, or at least we shouldn't be. What we should be asking them is trying to identify what are you good at doing? What are your natural skills and abilities? What are your attributes and your characteristics that you can build on? Because rather than picking a career, you are going to have to navigate your way through multiple careers in a very, very rapidly shifting world. Agility and mobility are going to be the key attributes of workers in the future. For employers, lots of implications in this as well. I think there is going to be growing expectations and perhaps demands by your workers, and the good workers, of course, you want to keep. The ability to move more fluidly in and out of the workforce as they are caring for children, as they are caring for aging adults and parents, and as they are continuing training and education. So lots of different ways to think about how we work in the future and how employers are going to need to think about their workers in the future. But let's turn now to Alberta and talk about what is happening in our province, what's going on in our economy right now, and what can we expect in 2020. Well, it comes as news to nobody in this room. We are in kind of a tough spot right now. 2019 is not really racking up to be that strong of a year of growth. Our forecast at the moment, my team at ATB, we do a quarterly forecast. At the moment, we are tracking 0.8% real GDP growth in 2019. And I'm never one to quibble for tenths of percentage points. Round it off essentially to zero. It is going to be more or less flat this year. That is disappointing. As I travel around the province, I get into every nook and cranny, and the disappointment and discouragement on the faces of Albertans, that's real. Because this is a province that is used to growing at 4, 5, or 6%. Coming out of that recession in 2015 and 2016, we did see a nice little encouraging growth spurt in 2017. People starting to feel like, all right, things are getting back to normal. But 2018 and now 2019, things have flattened out all over again. Largely, and this again comes as a surprise to nobody in the room, it's all around pipeline access for our commodities. It's completely taken the wind out of the sail of the energy industry. And everyone understands how significant the energy industry is to this city and to this province. The metaphor that I've used before on this stage, and I'll use it again, the energy sector used to be the engine of growth of our economy. Today, I would describe it as the backbone. In other words, vitally important to this economy, but not growing in the same way it used to and not providing the opportunities of employment in the same way it used to. Rather than the energy sector providing the growth, that growth is going to have to come from the other sectors like Mary outlined, especially the tech sector. And we are seeing it. This is happening and this is real, although I would suggest it is a long game. It's not going to happen next month or next year, although we are seeing it grow. And that's why the work of CED is so important, because it is a long game. We can't expect these green shoots to suddenly create the forest of an economy that we used to have, but we are moving in that direction. So, whatever happened to our dear friend Willie? Well, as I described, Willie retreated into his father's basement. He surrounded himself with books. He became very reclusive. It was not looking good for Willie at all. Not completing high school and withdrawing from life almost altogether. But Willie continued to surround himself with books. He had some real abilities with mechanics and engineering and mathematics. And he and his brother, they started to tinker in their garage. At the time, in the late 1800s in the United States, bicycles were becoming popular forms of transportation. And he and his brother, they set up in their basement a little workshop where they would fix and tinker around and make new forms of bicycles. And this went on for a little while, but as he and his brother continued to work on their mechanic skills and work on their engineering skills, and one thing led to the next. And in 1905, our young friend Willie, better known as Wilbur Wright, along with his younger brother Orville, they invented the airplane. And a remarkable achievement that, of course, changed the course of human development and human transportation in the 20th century. But his life took on a different trajectory after those tragic events in high school. Now, the parallels between Willie's life and where we're at in Alberta right now, I think, are quite real. We are in what maybe in anthropology or in philosophy, there's this concept they use called the liminal space. The liminal space is the state of existence between one state and another state. You are morphing, you are transforming, you are moving in between. Willie, he spent those 5 or 10 years in his father's basement, retreating from life, living as a recluse. He was in that liminal space between one state of existence and another. And often in that liminal space, be it an individual or a society, that liminal space moving from one state to another, it's often accompanied by a lot of confusion, often a lot of anger. There's a lot of high emotions in the liminal space because there is uncertainty. Exactly what are we becoming? And there's grieving because of what you've lost. You are no longer what you used to be, but you have not yet arrived at what you are yet to become. You're in that liminal space. And that's where I would describe Calgary and Alberta. We're in that liminal space, moving from one economy into another. We're not there yet. We're on our way. The energy industry is going to be a vital part of that new economy, along with the tech sector, along with health sciences, food sciences, tourism, and all of these other industries that I don't want to call new because they've been around for a long time, but they are becoming increasingly important in our economy. We're in that liminal space, and that's why I remain optimistic that not only are we moving to something different, we are, in fact, as a city and as a province, moving to something better. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, as always, Todd. That was super. I'd like to welcome now Pierre Cléroux, Senior Vice President and Chief Economist for the Business Development Bank of Canada in Montreal. And Pierre will provide us with his perspective on the global economy and where he sees Canada in the world right now. It's always very valuable to get that perspective on the world from outside your own backyard. So please welcome Pierre.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tara, for your introduction. What I would like to do in the next 15, 20 minutes is to talk about the world economy. And what I would like, it's important to talk about the world economy just because we are such an open economy, both in Alberta and in Canada. So the world economy has a huge impact on our ability to grow. So I would like to cover 3 things. First, I would like to give you an outlook about where is the world economy and where it's going. Second, I'm going to try to answer to the question that is really top of mind is when is going to be the next recession. I'm not going to give you a date, but I'm going to try to give you a perspective about how we think about the next recession. Finally, I'm going to conclude this presentation by talking about how the world economy is changing. Actually, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to operate in a very different world economy. So let's start with the outlook for the world economy. The world economy is actually slowing down. And the main reason for that is the trade tensions that we have around the world. The Brexit in Europe is having an impact, especially on Europe and UK. But the trade tension between the US and China is actually having an impact on the world economy. As you know, the US has introduced tariff on more than $500 billion of Chinese import, and this is having an impact on the world trade. For the first time since the last recession, our world trade are actually declining. This didn't happen since the last world recession. And this is having an impact in many ways. It's reducing business investment around the world, including in Canada and in the US. It's having an impact on the manufacturing sector that is slowing down. Actually, the growth in the manufacturing sector looks like just before the last recession. Finally, it's also having an impact on commodity prices. To respond to this slowdown, many countries around the world have reduced interest rates in a very significant way. Some countries went even to negative interest rates, something that we have never seen before. The result is interest rates around the world are lower than what we have experienced in the past. Economists evaluate that this trade tension that we see in different parts of the world is going to cause a loss of $700 billion for the world economy by 2020. And we see the impact of this slowdown in every part of the world. In Europe, for example, the Brexit is limiting growth in Europe. Growth in Europe is going to be around 1%, which is quite a modest growth. The growth in the UK is going to be lower than that. The tariff imposed by the US on China is having a huge impact on the Chinese economy. China is going to grow at a lower pace in the last 15 years. And this is having an impact on the rest of the region, including Japan and India. So the world economy is going to grow at about 3%, much lower than what we have experienced over the last few years. Actually, it's going to be the lowest growth since the last recession. However, we're still growing. So the world economy is still growing, but at a much lower pace than what we have seen. And the main reason is the trade tension that we have, and I'm going to come back to that. But of course, the most important economy for us is the United States. 75% of Canadian export are going to the US. 89% of Alberta export are going to the United States. And the news are actually not bad. Despite all the uncertainty and the trade tension, the economy continued to perform quite well. The US has an amazing growth of 2.9% last year, stimulated by the tax reform of Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump reduced taxes by $150 billion. And that, as you can see from the graph, that's really stimulated the economy. As the tax reform is phasing out, the economy is going back to a more sustainable growth, around 2%. There's actually two stories in the US right now. The first one, consumer are still very, very confident, and they are the engine of the growth in the US. The second story is business are worried about the trade tension, and this is having an impact on their business intention. So the reason why consumers are still optimistic is because the job market is so good. The unemployment rate in the US is 3.5%. This is actually the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. So people who have been out of the job market for 2 or 3 years, they are coming back. And as the market is getting tighter, salaries are increasing. So more Americans are working. They're making more revenue. So this is increasing their confidence in the economy. And as a result, they are spending money. Retail sales are increasing after a decline in terms of growth because interest rates were increasing, they are rebounding. Same thing for the housing market. The housing market continues to grow in the US as the job market is improving so much. So on the consumer side, people are confident and they are driving the US economy. On the business side, they are seeing the impact of the trade tension. They are facing tariff imposed on Chinese import. So they are a bit more worried. And we see that business investment are down in the US for the first time since 2016. That's the reason why the Fed reduced interest rate at the end of the summer. They are afraid that these trade tensions are going to slow down the economy. But we are confident that the economy will continue to grow in the US around 2% for this year and also for 2020, which is for the US very solid growth. In Canada, the story is a bit different. The Canadian economy has been slowing down, as we can see from the graph. Growth this year is going to be modest, 1.5%. Actually, the decline in oil price about 12 months ago had a huge impact on the Canadian economy. Growth is going to improve in 2020, and we should be closer to the capacity, the full capacity of the Canadian economy. But as you can see from this graph, growth is still quite modest. So it leads to the question, are we going into a recession? There's a lot of talk about the recession. Actually, that's the question I get the most often. When is going to be the next recession? Like I said, I'm not going to give you a date. And the reason for that, obviously giving you a date would be quite stupid, but also I'm going to try to convince you that we're not going into a recession. So in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to try to convince you that we are going in a slower period of growth, but we are not going into a recession. There's two reasons why people believe that we're going into a recession. First, because there's a lot of uncertainty around the world, and that's definitely true. There's a trade war between China and the US, the Brexit, the Yellow Jacket in France. There's a lot of uncertainty around the world. The second reason is because we had a long period of growth. The US have experienced 10 years of growth nonstop. 10 years of growth without a recession. So a lot of people believe that business cycle, they last for 10 years. So we need a recession. That's where we are now. We are at the end of the cycle, and we will have a recession. So that's the first point I want to address. First, recession just don't happen like this. You need a shock. When we look back in our history, all the recession that we have experienced, they were caused by a shock. We don't have a recession just because we had a long period of growth, and this is the end of it. So when we look back, and the graph that you see is actually the economic story of Canada for the last 40 years. The bar represents the economic growth for every quarter. And when you have a negative growth, 2 quarters in a row, you have a recession. So as you can see, over the last 40 years, we had 4 recessions in Canada. Then you might be calculating 4 recessions in 40 years. Well, that's 1 recession every 10 years. I know. But if you look at the graph, business cycles never last for 10 years. Sometimes they were for 7 years, for 5 years. Actually, Australia has been growing for 28 years. So there's not such a theory that business cycle lasts for 10 years. But the point I want to make is each of these recessions were created because of a shock. 1981, some people here might remember, the inflation rate in Canada, 12%. To control inflation, the Bank of Canada increased interest rate to 19%. I know it's hard to believe, especially for the young people, because interest rates are so low. But in one part in Canada, in 1881, Canadians paid 24% for mortgages. Some people remember that. The good news is they control inflation. The bad news, as you can see from the graph, they really created a recession. Second recession, 1991, the oil price jumped around the world, and that created a world recession. 2007, I think everybody remember this one. We had a housing crisis in the US that created a financial crisis and then a world recession. And finally in Canada in 2014, we had a recession when the oil price dropped by 60%. So as you can see, we need a shock to create a recession. Recessions just don't happen. So that's exactly what economists are looking for now. What is going to be the next shock? One of the usual shocks is inflation. And the graph that you see now is the inflation in Canada over time. And as you can see, inflation is still relatively low. After 10 years of growth, we still have low inflation. And that's exactly the case in the US as well. So inflation is still under control after 10 years of growth. So despite a long period of growth, we're still having low inflation. This is a very good news. It means that the next recession is not going to come from inflation. Central banks don't need to increase interest rate because inflation is under control. That's exactly what we are seeing now. Both in Canada and the US, interest rates are stopped to increase. So the next recession is not going to come by high interest rate. But there's a number of risks in the economy. And these on the graph are the 3 risks that are the most often mentioned by economists. The first one is We have a high debt ratio in Canada in terms of consumer. Long period of growth, low interest rate. The housing market has been increasing, so we have a high debt ratio. Is that enough to create a recession? Well, we don't think so, because over the last 2 years, when the interest rate has been increasing in Canada, Canadians have been adjusting. The housing market has slowed down. Retail sales has been slowing down. So yes, this has slowed down the economy, but this has not created a recession. Second, the oil price. As you probably noticed from the previous graph, oil was responsible from 2 of the last 4 recessions in Canada. So oil could create the next recession in the country. Actually, we don't think so. The oil price has been stable. The world demand is still increasing. Not as much as in the past, but it's still increasing, supporting the price. So we believe, there's no reason to believe, that the oil price will decline like we saw in 2014, for example. Finally, the biggest risk that we see as economists is the last one, the trade war between the 2 largest economies in the world. So far, this trade war has slowed down the world economy, not only in the US and in China especially, but also in the rest of the world. So is it going to cause the next recession? Well, the response depends. The answer really depends how long this trade dispute is going to last. If we have a trade dispute for the 2 or 3 next years, I would say probably that will lead to a recession. But there's an election in 12 months in the US. So personally, I'm convinced that we're going to have a deal. Mr. Trump needs a strong economy to go into the next election, and he has the power to sign a deal. So I believe that we are going to avoid a recession because Mr. Trump is going to sign a deal with China, which will lift some of the uncertainty around the world. So to the question, when is going to be the next recession? Actually, we don't believe we're going into a recession. However, we are going into a lower period of growth. Growth in the world economy is going to be lower in the next few years. Actually, the world economy is changing. There's 3 major factors that are changing the world economy. First, there's a growing uncertainty. Second, we have very low interest rate, and we believe that low interest rates are going to remain. Third, we're going to experience a period of low growth. So first, uncertainty. This is the graph that you see is hard to read, but this is the index of uncertainty that we use. You can use any index of uncertainty and you will have the same result. There's a lot of uncertainty around the world. Actually, we haven't seen so much uncertainty for a very long time. Like the mayor said before, there's a lot of friction, a lot of polarization in the world right now. The Brexit between UK and Europe, the Yellow Jacket in France, the tension between China and the United States. Actually, many countries in the world are using tariff against other countries. 10 years ago, there was less than 1% of the world import that was facing tariff. Right now, it's over 7%. As you can see from the graph, over the last 4 years, the number of tariffs around the world has increased, slowing down the world trade and creating a lot of uncertainty. In Canada, we have experienced that. Over the last 2 years, our #1 trade partner has increased the number of tariffs on aluminum, on steel, on lumber. Steel and aluminum are gone, but the tariff on lumber still exists and is causing a slowdown in our lumber sector in Canada. So this is the new reality. This is going to last for a while because many countries, as their economy is slowing down, they want to protect their economy. And they believe that having tariff on import is going to help them. So first new element or factor in the world economy is we're going to have to live with much more uncertainty than in the past. The second one is low interest rate. You have probably noticed that interest rates are much lower now than before. The graph is showing three levels of interest rate: Canada in red, the US in blue, and Europe in yellow. Just in Canada, the prime rate is 1.75. Before the last recession, it was 4%. Before the recession, it was 6%. If I had a longer period of time, you would see that interest rate has been declining over time every year or every business cycle. In some countries around the world, interest rates are negative. When I studied economics, we didn't even study that. We didn't think it was an option. But now, economists are trying to figure out how this is going to work. The point is, interest rates in the world are slowing down. And this is a new trend that is not going to go away. We have an aging population in the world, a lot of wealth, a lot of money, keeping interest rates lower. We have slow growth in many parts of the world, so not as much investment as in the past, keeping interest rates lower. Is this a problem? Well, yes and no. It's actually good for investment. Many investment will have money because the return is going to be higher than zero interest rate or minus 1% of interest rate. So this is actually going to help investment around the world. But the issue is, for the next slowdown in the economy, it's going to be very difficult to use interest rate to stimulate the economy. Just if you take the example of a recent example, the last recession, the US has reduced the interest rate from 5% to almost zero. The prime rate in the US today is 2%. If we have a recession, and we don't think so, I want to remind you that, but if we had one, it would be very difficult to use interest rate to stimulate the economy. So we will have to use different tools. Fiscal policy will have to be used to stimulate our economy, which is much more challenging for many countries around the world. So second factor that is new in the world economy is we are in an environment with very low interest rate. Final factor is actually we are entering in a lower growth period. The graph that you see now, I promise is the last one, is the economic growth in Canada in blue or turquoise. It's actually the period of growth in Canada between recession that you see in red. As you can see, and this is for the last 60 years. In the 60s, the Canadian economy used to grow by 5.2% in average in the growth period. Right now, the economy is, in average, about 2%. There's a huge difference in terms of growth. And if I had the graph for the US, you will see exactly the same pattern. So what's going on? How come our economy is not growing as much as in the past? Well, there's two main factors. First, we don't have a labor force that is increasing as much as in the past. When we had 5.2% growth in the 60s, the women entered the labor force, and that increased the labor force drastically. When we had 2.9% growth around the year 2000, it's because we had the invention of computer that really improved productivity, and that stimulated the economy. Right now, we have an aging population in Canada and in most developed economies around the world. So our labor force is not increasing as much as in the past. This is going to limit the growth of the country and also in many countries around the world. Second factor is productivity. Our productivity is not increasing as much as in the past. And that's also limiting economic growth. So, in conclusion, we're not going into a recession, despite all the uncertainty and the trade tensions that we have around the world. We believe that we're just entering a period of slower growth. Growth that is going to be limited by our aging population, but also by our lack of productivity. The only way that we can change that is by what people have been talking here this afternoon, is by innovation and technology. When you have an aging population, when you are not able to increase your labor force, the only way to stimulate the economy more, to break this 2% growth, to take it to another level, will be to increase our productivity by innovation and technology. Thank you. Thank you.
Anywhere you like.
Oh,
sure.
Thank you. So we'd like to just do a quick Q&A. We promised you that we'd get you out by 1:30, so we're still going to try. We might only have time for a couple of questions, but we did solicit questions this year from the members of Calgary Economic Development's Team Calgary Partnership. So let's get right down to it. We heard a lot of numbers today, so I had put this question to all three of you first. How much is sentiment a factor on economic activity and growth? And is it sometimes even more impactful, let's say, than tangible economic drivers?
Over to you, Todd.
It's having a great impact. We can see it in business investment. It's very interesting in Canada right now. Businesses are busy, but they're not confident in the economy. So they're not investing, but they're hiring people. So the level of jobs in Canada is increasing actually faster than the economy, but business investment are going down. So business confidence is very important for investment, as consumer confidence are important also. It's important also on the consumer side. But definitely on the business side, it's very important.
Mary, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've witnessed that from the front row seat with respect to the impact that not having a pipeline has had on investment in Alberta. I mean, we've gone from having we've gone from having $80 billion of investment to having, in the teens of investment in Alberta, particularly around the oil sands. And you think about the impact of that on the Canadian economy, that investment into the energy industry in Canada was greater than all of the investment across all the other sectors in the country, added up accumulatively. Now we're still the largest investment into our sector, but we're kind of hovering around closer to some of the other industries across Canada. So it's had a huge investment, a huge impact, and that's because of not having a pipeline or access to global markets.
Todd, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, well, the only other thing I would add is in the housing market is where you really see that consumer confidence is so important, because who feels like buying a house if they're worried about their job or if they don't have a job? So that's really, I think, the biggest thing that we're seeing here in Calgary right now is that anxiety around the economy holding back key industries like housing.
I put this question to all of you as well. What growth sectors do you think are well positioned to significantly contribute to Alberta's economy and the GDP over the next 5 years? And as a follow-up question, are we doing enough to support those sectors?
Well, I guess I might start with, I've always been bullish on agriculture and agri-foods. And agriculture has a much longer history in this province, in fact, than the energy industry. We tend to get very, very focused, for obvious reasons, on the energy industry. And we get focused on pipelines, again, obvious why we do. But we tend to forget that there is an agriculture and agri-food sector in this province that has been growing leaps and bounds, sometimes quietly, sometimes not so quietly, but that's one that I'm still really, really excited about.
Okay. Mary?
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think a lot of the work that we've been doing has been focused on that. We have a MOU with Olds College, and which has a smart farm, and I don't even think people realize this, and it's sadly that it doesn't get played very much, but over the last few years, Dow DuPont decided to amalgamate and set up their crop sciences group here. We have Nutrien, who's one of the world's largest agriculture companies. We have Bayer and Monsanto, who 12 months ago decided to consolidate here with their crop sciences group. And BASF, we just attracted out of Mississauga to Calgary, and they had other options. And when they set out a press release, we got very little coverage here in Calgary until I stood up in City Council one day and said, oh, by the way, BASF came here, they set up their head office here. And the only people that picked it up was the Airdrie Chronicle. So there's a lot to celebrate. And so I'm big on ag, big on value add. I think we're perfectly located. And even yesterday, BASF and TELUS did a joint venture to buy Hummingbird, which is a tech company. And so there's lots going on there, and it's such an exciting sector. And our business development manager has the best job in Calgary, I would just say.
I totally agree, especially that the world demand for food is increasing. So Canada and Alberta are benefiting from that. And I think it's just the beginning. As developed economies like India, China are creating a new middle class. People who have enough resources to buy high quality food, I think this Canada and Alberta are going to benefit from that. Yeah. The sector that is also really growing, and we have been talking about this today, but this is so true, is technology. We see technology in our life more than ever before. AI, digital technology, automation, like Todd talked about. We're just at the beginning of this revolution, and we're going to create a lot of economic activities on technology. This is the sector that has been growing the most in Canada over the last 5 years. 5% every year over the last 5 years. There's 500,000 people in Canada working in tech. And I believe this is just the beginning. And this big strength we have in Canada is our education system. I know we often complain about it, but when you compare Canada with the rest of the world, we have one of the best, most sophisticated education system, which will help us to build talent for the technology sector.
Let me just squeeze one last question in, because I want to end on a positive note, because we did talk today. There is an admission that Albertans are feeling pessimistic right now. Do you think there is an area of economic activity that we should be more optimistic about than current sentiment might indicate to us?
Yeah, I would agree with Pierre. I don't view technology as a sector anymore. I view it as a way of doing business. And I think you're 100% right that we are on the dawn of big things to happen. And the biggest place they're going to happen? In the industrial sectors. And what are we best set up for? The industrial sectors. We're really good at it. We've excelled at it. And it's like, I'm not kidding you, when I talk to the Nutriens and the Parklands and the Suncors, it sounds like a tech company. And the important part is getting your digital roadmap in place so you can take advantage of artificial intelligence and IoT and AR and VR and autonomous systems so you can be more efficient, more productive, and more predictable, because that is the future. And so, and I'm excited the fact that all the post-secondaries are working on creating a talent accelerator and work-integrated learning like Todd, because we were going to have to continue to upgrade our skills. And great organizations like Bow Valley are doing great micro-credentialing. And so there's lots happening here around technology on top of our industrial sectors, and it's about building on our strengths and adapting for the future.
Nothing else to add? No?
Maybe let me add that I totally agree it's important to diversify the economy, and technology and farming was already there, and but we shouldn't forget oil. Oil is going to still be very important in the economy for the next 20, 30 years. The world demand for oil keep increasing. And as developed economies are much more developed and building a middle class, the demand for oil continues to increase. So yes, right now, like Todd explained, this year it's a bit more difficult because the price went down. And there's always cycles in oil, just like any other commodity. But oil will remain an important economic driver for the next decade.
And natural gas.
And natural gas. I totally agree. Yeah.
Pierre and Mary and Todd, thank you very much. We could talk all afternoon, and we've run out of time today, but we appreciate you taking some questions. Thank you. Thank you. Now, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to introduce Wellington Holbrook, the Chief Transformation Officer for ATB Financial, to conclude our discussion this afternoon.
Just remember the good side here is I'm between you and going back to work. This has got to be better than that. Thank you very much, Tara. And you're an amazing host, as always. And I want to say thank you to the Calgary Economic Development team and my team at ATB, today's presenters who were pretty awesome, great storytellers, in fact. and everyone involved in pulling off this fantastic event. Many of you would know my boss and our CEO, ATB CEO, Curtis Stange. He would have loved to have been here. I'm here to bring thanks and for everything you do from him to support business and partnership in Alberta. But I'm also here to ask for your help a little bit too. Much on the same line of thinking that Mary was sharing with you, how we have to change the narrative in our province. I actually ran up the stairs, I'm out of breath now. A few weeks ago, I was having dinner with my daughters. They're 14 and 15 years old, and we were watching the news together, dangerous thing to do at dinner, right? And my oldest daughter was actually, she looked disturbed, and she was visibly upset by how dire the future seems to look and how dire her future seems to be. And it occurred to me really in that moment, this is wrong. Because you know what? The future has always been scary. I started thinking of my own childhood, and I remember we did drills at school where we hid under the desk because we were scared of nuclear annihilation. I couldn't sleep for weeks after we'd do these drills. Just a couple decades ago, we were worried about our world order coming to an end because of terrorism. And right here in Alberta, the dark ages of the 1980s aren't that far behind us. And despite all those hard times that led to fears about what the future might hold, we still found a way forward. And today, on many levels, the world has never been better. There's never been fewer people dying from war of disease, and there's never been less people living in poverty. There's never been a better time to be alive, really, albeit it has been a bumpy road and really downright hard for us here in Alberta, and so many Albertans. And today, all of us in this room, we need to find ways to see the silver lining in the challenges all around us. We need to look at new ways to solve problems, and Mary and the economists brilliantly pointed out ways we might do that. We need to look for better outcomes, but this is hard too, and I can tell you firsthand, I know how hard that is because I'm ATB's Chief Transformation Officer. I get to play in a lot of the fun technology that Mary was referencing, and my job is to make sure ATB can adapt and build the capabilities designed for the future so we can thrive in an age of disruption and disruptions all around us. And I can tell you many scaremongers talk all the time about the end of the age of banking. Yet I see the great innovation and the forward-thinking spirit in our people right here in Calgary and across Alberta. It is inspiring. It is hard not to be optimistic about the future when you can see firsthand what we're capable of. We're building a new bank right here in Alberta called Brightside, cloud-native, digital, built in the cloud. We're working together with other great Alberta businesses to solve the problem of what completely digital identification for Albertans could look like. We're deploying artificial intelligence to bring better advice and solutions to our customers, and we're just at the very beginning of that journey. It's just icing on the cake on how ATB intends to reimagine banking. And so much inspiration comes from our customers, who literally are forging a new path for Alberta. Many of them are here today. And two of them I wanted to point out, Wesley and Jennifer Farnell of 8 Ounce Coffee. They started in 2011 right here, and instead of simply focusing on themselves in a really highly competitive industry, they decided to solve problems in a different way. They started focusing on building a community of coffee roasters to really transform the industry itself and help elevate themselves as well as their competitors. And in doing that, they became named one of Canada's fastest growing wholesale and distribution companies in just a few years. So when you can see the world through the lens I have, the inspiration in this room and Alberta is overwhelming. And for 81 years, ATB has been here to support Albertans through tough times, and we intend to be here for decades to come to support more businesses like 8 Ounce Coffee, to take on the challenges ahead, and to help Alberta win. And we intend to play our role as a catalyst for economic growth and to contribute to a bright future ahead. So my ask tonight is, or this afternoon, tonight already, my ask this afternoon is, can you join me and let's start changing the story of Alberta, and let's start changing the story for the young people of Alberta's future and start showing them why there's reasons to be hopeful, just as Mary and the Economist gave us every reason to be hopeful today. You're with me? Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have one very important thing left to do. I would like to introduce Charles Duncan, the Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for WestJet Airlines, and a new member of Calgary Economic Development's Board of Directors. We're going to make the draw for a round-trip flight for two on any regularly scheduled WestJet flight in Canada to any WestJet destination in the United States, and that includes Hawaii.
Thank you. I won't keep you all here any longer, but I just want to say we are at WestJet really bullish in the economy here. We have been investing in aircraft, facilities, building a new lounge here in Calgary, and launched just this year service to Portland, Austin, Paris, and Dublin. And we couldn't be more thankful for the support from the community we've gotten. All those new routes are doing really, really well, and we're proud to call Calgary our home. And just really do want to thank all of you for your support as we're building a hub, as Mary's talked about, right here in Calgary. So let me draw a ticket again. This is 2 tickets anywhere we fly in Canada and the US. And the winner is Lara Arendor from Robots and Pencils. Is Lara here? You have to be present to win. Do I see a hand? Is that Laura there? Okay, I think we've got the winner. Well, again, thank you all very much. And congratulations, Laura.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes Economic Development's Outlook 2020. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next year.